Hello, everyone. Should be streaming right now, and I'm just going to double check really quick. It should be live. Should be. And we're going to start in just a few moments. So I just want to check. And then once we get that, I'll be happy to start speaking with everyone and go into the story. I don't see it showing on Facebook right now. Okay. So if someone can, please let me know. But we're going to start off. And today we're talking about restarting the world. Can we do it? Can we restart after the coronavirus? Because the big thing is we're scared. We are all very, very scared right now. And that's true of the entire world. I don't know of anywhere in the world that you can say isn't scared about the coronavirus. And I understand it. I understand it completely. I'm in one of the target groups. I'm one of the people who's dealing with this kind of issue. Those who are 50 and above are target groups. Men are target groups. We're the highest rates. So there's a few things that are worried. And I do want to mention, you can always go to, for people, one of the first things I want to say, I understand we're all scared. Information is the answer. That's what I hope to do today. We're going to talk about some information. We can make plans. The worst thing in life, regardless of whether it's corona or anything else, is when you say, but we're scared. And you're acting because you're scared. And you have the emotion of being scared. When you get that, that's the problem. That's the thing that's going to always hurt. So what we want to make sure is we're not acting because we're scared. We're going to be acting because we have information. One of the things you can do is you can go to one of my sites. This is the Vasquez for Broom. It's one of the sites. You don't have to go to this one, but some of them have it. And on there, I have some information about suicide prevention, some of the articles and podcasts I've been doing about it, but also one of the most important things. There's information from New York State on the current status of coronavirus. There is a link to that. There is the suicide prevention number, which is 800-273-8255. There is the domestic abuse hotline, which in the southern tier would be 607-748-7453. And in the Mohawk Valley, you can reach out to 315-797-7740. For substance abuse, 800-662-4357. Let me say that again, 800-662-4357. And also for CHOW, which, by the way, they need donations, please contact them at 800-901-2180. CHOW is for those who are in need of food, especially if you have families, kids that need food. Contact them about the food pantries and donations of food if you have the ability to donate food. There is a great need at this time. And for those who have small businesses, I have a link for the Southern Tier, the Response, Recovery, and Resilience Task Force, with some of their data and their information about the most up-to-date information about trying to save our small businesses. And you can go to the Vasquez for Broom and just check under the coronavirus, our community versus fear link, and you'll be able to see that. So I hope people will be able to take advantage of it. Now, this is, as I said, we are currently on, looks like I'm almost only streaming on the YouTube channel right now. I don't know why. Facebook, I love you. And I'm going to send out a message about that as we go. But some of the things that I want to talk about here, some of the things that I think are very important. Hang on, let me just say this real quick. We are live on Facebook right now, on YouTube, excuse me. Okay, good. So I'm just sending out that message so people know what's going on. So, with that being said, since we're not showing up on Facebook like I would have wanted to, let's really focus on what's the issue here today. What are we going to be talking about? America. The world is trying to restart because we've got to deal with the coronavirus. I mean, we've seen this from everyone. There's been a complete meltdown of society, and we've got to rebuild it. We got to restart. We've got to change this from fear to life, to society, to get back to some of the normalcy that we had before. And we can do it. We can definitely do it. Now, how do we do it? It's not that hard. We have to start businesses. We have to go back to work. We have to get back to our daily routines as best as we can. And I know a lot of people have been having different feelings about that. In fact, one of them more famously is Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo is been suggesting that he doesn't love what he does anymore, that he doesn't want to go back to work at CNN and to push some of the issues that he's been pushing. You know, he mentioned that he doesn't like what he does professionally. He doesn't value indulging in his rationality, hyper-partisanship. And I can understand. There's a lot of people who are he's dealing with COVID. He's been isolated. And so there's a lot of people who are dealing with that kind of situation. And they're not famous and they're not rich like Chris Cuomo is, like the Cuomo family are. And they're saying, do I want to go back to work? There's going to be a lot of people who are going to change jobs. There's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to get that option because the jobs won't be there. We are going to see a massive recession. I've been saying that for months. It's not new. I've been trying to warn people so we could know that we're going to be having a recession. And that's not about fear. That's about facts. That's about being able to enable us to be able to react in the best way possible. Oops, that one. I didn't realize which camera I'm on. And we want to make sure that we're reacting in the best possible way with information. Because if we have information, then we can make the right decisions. And so we know there's a recession coming. We know that businesses aren't going to just get right back on board and they're certainly going to have tons of money. And this is a problem that's not only being faced by us here in the United States, but we see that in Spain, they are having some of the same problems. Spain has the second most number of people who have been affected by coronavirus, COVID-19. And in fact, hundreds of thousands of non-essential workers were allowed to go back to work, about 300,000 people. That includes people in manufacturing and construction, critical jobs, although bars, restaurants, retail have not come back to work, which is also critical. Mind you, Spain has had 18,000 deaths that have been reported. So they're right after the United States here, and just slightly above New York State. And Spain has recognized they need to get back to normal. They've got to get their life back, to take it back from the coronavirus, to let go of the fear and live. And I think that's an important thing. Because I will say it, I've said it many, many times, I will say it again. Coronavirus is survivable. 98% of everyone in the world will survive coronavirus. That means you. You are going to survive coronavirus. Just about everyone is going to survive coronavirus. Thank God. And I'm happy for that. And that is an important thing. So we need to get back to work. We need to get back to our lives. So how do we do that? What do we do about that? And that's, a little bit trickier of a question. So we know some of the things that we can do. And just like in Spain, 300,000 people have gone back to work. They have to. In the United States, well, we're looking at it being a little more difficult than that. We have states that are fighting amongst themselves. We have within the states, in communities, counties that are fighting against themselves. I'll give you a great example of what I'm talking about here. So on April 11th, the Binghamton mayor, Mayor Rich David, had this post that was made talking about drive-by birthday parties. Now, let me take a step back and say this. So there was, it was about that time, April 11th, a lot of people, because they've been cooped up, they've been locked up for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, they decided, hey, I can't stand this. I want to go celebrate. I want to go out and celebrate someone's birthday. I want to be able to let people know that, I'm alive and that I'm doing okay. And so what they decided to do is they said, all right, I'm going to go out. And since I can't do everything that I want to do, what I can do is I can go out and I can drive past my cousin, my brother, my sister, my father, my mother, my family members, my friends, drive by their houses and have a little bit of a parade, a drive-by parade with a couple friends, have some posters written up and say, hey, happy birthday, or, happy anniversary for weddings, or whatever the event may be, to have some kind of semblance of social interaction. Now, the real question came up very quickly after people started noticing that this was being done. Is it legal? Because there is a quarantine. There is the forced isolation that has come from coronavirus. So on April 11th, about 2 days after it first became public or generally aware of the public that drive-by birthday parties were happening, Mayor Rich David went out and he said, hey, I looked into this and good news. He had conference calls with the governor, Broome County, and everybody agreed, yes, you can do the parties. Now, there's a problem with it because you couldn't get out of your car and you had to limit the number of people who were in the vehicle. But more importantly, you could do this. This is something that was permissible. The government, how kind of the government to allow human beings, American citizens, to be able to go out and celebrate with each other on something as simple as driving by someone's house with a poster that says happy birthday or happy anniversary. Yeah, of course we can do that. But be as it may, he confirmed that there was nothing in the regulations about the coronavirus isolation that prevented this. And that's an important thing. And so he shared that with the community. Now, the problem is what we saw today, the county executive of Broome County, who's Jason Garnar, who was in this article. He was on WMBF, a local news radio station, and he mentioned that he was the one who was responsible for getting the approval for the drive-by celebrations throughout the county, and Binghamton is inside Broome County. And he took credit for it. And he said he was the reason, because he was getting a lot of feedback from his own family. And so he had to go out and reach out to the governor and find out that this was okay. And today is April 14th, and that's when he had that conversation. You know what? This isn't doing anyone any good. Even though he was against the idea of being able to have the drive-by celebrations, as he publicly stated, and that Jason Garnar was the one who wanted to institute Operation Crush COVID, which I have completely disavowed. I do not agree with that. I do not like that idea that people can only escape from their solitary confinement of their homes on the same day, even or odd, as the year of their birth. I don't agree with that. That's an overreach of power of government, and he even admits it wasn't a legal thing to be done. It was an unofficial official statement. It was an act of the government as a, quote, strong suggestion announced as an action of the government. It's playing semantics with the power of government, and I disagree with it. But Mr. Garnar is now the big thing is we're seeing this across the country where we have various people at different levels of government, from governors, county executives, legislators, the city councils, and mayors that are all talking different stories and coming out. And I'm not blaming Mayor David, nor am I saying County Executive Garnar. I believe they both had these conversations with the government. I believe with the upper levels of New York State. And I believe they had a conversation with each other. But I believe that playing politics to try and take the goodwill of the public, of playing on the idea of, hey, I'm the one responsible for letting this happen, that's not helping anyone. And as we look forward, we have to keep in mind these kind of petty squabbles are not going to benefit people as we try to get back to our lives, get back to work. It does mean, though, that we're a lot closer to getting back to regular life than we've been in a long, long time. And I can say that because the fact that we're getting back into politics means that we're trying to get back to being normal. Life is trying to get back to being regular and real. We're hearing people talk about Joe Biden and the fact that he's now the Democratic nominee to go up against President Trump in 2020. And yeah, he's going to lose, but it doesn't matter. He's now the candidate. Bernie Sanders has done what he did last time. He's out of the race. And, just like with Hillary Clinton, he's now endorsing the guy that he said was absolutely horrible. He's endorsing the policies that he said aren't socialist enough. And he's going with, a guy Joe Biden, who's not the best candidate, but he is the candidate. So we're getting back to America being normal, back to America having that normalcy of, we're talking about politics, we're talking about elections, we're getting ready to get back to work. So I think we're somewhere between 2 weeks, a month away from people being back at work. I mean, really, the majority of people being back to work, wherever that's possible. But we have to remember it's not going to be all at once the greatest thing that's ever happened before. In fact, what's going to happen is what we're seeing right now. According to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, we're seeing that there's going to be a big downturn. The world is in a recession. There is no question about it. We are already in the recession. We just haven't seen the impact of it yet because we haven't been out of our homes yet. But it's going to happen. And we're looking at a loss of at least 3% in the world, a global shrinking, rather than the expansion that was expected for 2020. And we're going to see banks are going to have problems, a lot of problems, a lot of issues because of loans that have been made and can't be paid back. We're going to have nations that aren't going to be able to pay off loans that they've made. We're going to see economies, stock markets, not perform. Again, I'm not saying this to scare you. I don't want anyone to be scared, but I want you to be informed. This is the reality of the situation. We're going to see businesses not do as well. We're going to see people still be scared. People are going to be afraid about coming out into public. Think of all the fear that has been pushed onto everyone in the world right now. We literally shut down the world. Do you think if they said go back to work tomorrow, everyone's just going back to work? No. It's going to take a little while. People have to get their confidence back. And they want to see a stop to some of these big numbers of the number of deaths that are out there, which are blown way out of proportion. Way out of proportion. Folks, I was talking about it just a couple of days ago, and I thought I made it pretty clear when I was talking about it that if we really look at this, and I think the article was written yesterday, and we're looking at the mortality rates The mortality rate is 0.0066% for the United States. Globally, it's 0.0015%. That is an enormous survivability rate. Okay? Out of 325 million people in the United States, you have almost no chance of dying from this. Yes, there were 21,000 deaths last it was reported, and that number will go higher, and it is a sad thing. And I am sorry to hear about anyone losing their life. But I have to tell you, this isn't the thing. By the way, I do see the Liberty First Foundation, they mentioned paranoia is a very strong drug. And you're right, it is. It's an incredible drug. But it's not something that we should allow to stop us. Because we have to focus not on the fear, which has been promoted out there for the benefit of news companies that need to make a profit, but rather the survivability, the fact that we are all going to get through this and we're going to do well together. But our businesses aren't going to come back overnight. They're not going to open up every business all at once. Your favorite bar, your favorite restaurant, your favorite clothing store probably is not going to open up right away. You're not going to get the new iPhone 12 immediately. It's not going to happen. We have to understand that. And that means the economy is going to start off slowly. And it means that some of the businesses that have been struggling to survive through this, they're not going to make it. Some of them, we're going to lose 10 to 15% of our businesses, our small and local businesses, because of this. In fact, in that same article, I was talking about it a little bit later, potentially 29% of the small businesses in the United States may go out of business, and roughly 36 million Americans may be without work and may be unemployed. That's huge. And they're already talking about the fact that this recession globally is going to be bigger than the Great Depression. And we're talking about 36 million people out of work. We're talking about 12% unemployment in the United States. It's a lot. It's a little scary. That means for you and me, we have to, hang on, we're getting a call. Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hi.
This is Jason from Binghamton.
Hey, Jason from Binghamton. It's good to hear you. Thank you for joining us live. By the way, you are on air as we speak right now.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I just figured I'd call in and talk about some of the issues directly affecting Broome County and Binghamton, and how this whole thing's gonna affect the area here.
Okay. Before we go further, Jason, I just want to double check. You are not County Executive Jason Garnar, is that correct?
No, I am not.
Okay, because I know I've seen Jason from Binghamton on the YouTube channel. You've made some comments, but I want people who are listening to know that since I was just referencing Jason Garnar, you are not him. But go ahead.
No, I am. No.
Okay.
No, just a little more conservative, I think, in certain policies than what would be implemented from him. But just to make a comment though about how you were talking about Jason Gardner, and the fact is that he definitely pushes that virtue signaling, how great I am for allowing everybody to do what they really have a constitutional right to do anyway, and there's no laws actually restricting what to just drive around, not unless of course they want to create a law in Bangton, instantaneously they could do that. But executive orders, the way they were implemented, definitely were not the way to be done. So.
Oh, I agree. Lots of problems with that. Go on.
But I just was looking at some different issues and the problems that we already have in Binghamton, and then how this is just going to push it even farther. My big thing is that you have to look at where our bread and butter is for our area, or for Binghamton anyway, and that's Binghamton University. And when you look at the students, we have primarily, I think, I was reading some statistics that domestically, I think about 65%, the students are domestic, and then we have about 30% that are from out of the area or even out of the country. And that is a massive problem because if that 30% of those students don't come back in the fall, I mean, you can pretty much kiss all the bars and restaurants goodbye, that are basically holding on by a thread at this point. And then the real question is that what are we going to be doing, for the city, because I see one thing is that we got this like loan that they're trying to push out and help,
Yeah.
them along, but it's just, I look at it and I go, I'm like, it's not, I don't believe that's the place for the city to be spending its money and what to be doing at this point, if you know what I mean.
I do. And just to remind people, we're talking about the Response, Recovery, and Resiliency Task Force that happens to be in the Binghamton Southern Tier region. But there are other similar programs in other counties and other states. And of course, the Small Business Administration from the government is also looking to help small businesses with
Right.
loans.
I mean, the federal, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, this really, I mean, all support's going to have to come from the federal government when it comes to this. I mean, Binghamton itself, I mean, our tax base and our taxpayers cannot be putting up, money for this because this goes straight to the property taxes. And I mean, I did have an issue too when it came to, I mean, when it came to the blue bags, I mean, all
Hmm.
of a sudden they decide, hey, we're not gonna, have, anybody pay for the blue bags, and he's like, well, the mayor goes, he says, well, it's gonna cost us a lot of money, but I really don't want anybody struggling during this period of time. And I'm thinking, well, geez, so we're gonna stick it on the back end when we're even farther in the hole to pay for all the amount. I mean, at some point we're gonna have to pay the money on that. Um, and I guess what I'm saying though is
Hmm.
there's decisions that are actually being made right now that are not helping us, really even currently now, nor will they actually, help us get through in the future at all, as well.
Well, you're
And
right. And let me address a little bit of that, Jason,
sure,
because one, you're right. And that's why I keep telling people we're in a recession. I've been saying that since the very beginning. In the first week of March, I was saying this is going to cause a recession. It's now confirmed by the International Monetary Fund that I'm right. So when we're looking at that, we have to remember the federal government isn't going to answer all of our problems. The in the a bill that was just passed, $2 billion being spent on business and the public. It's part of that $1,200 check everyone's going to be receiving. That money is not enough.
no,
That's just enough for the average person in America. That is enough money to pay your rent for 1 month. That's it. And now that means that everyone has to still have to deal with paying the rest of your bills. In addition, that same bill from Congress is able to help a lot of cities if your city has over 500,000 people. If you're in a smaller city, like our city, Binghamton, or in the county of Broome, where you have less than 500,000 people, then this doesn't, at least at this moment, it's not going to help you. And that's a problem because that's not enough help. So, yes, more help has to come from the federal government and the state government, but we've got a plan for this. If we're not thinking ahead, like you're mentioning, yeah, we get rid of the blue bags. It's a less of an upfront cost, more on the back end. But guess what? We already have the back end full of. We've been not making money. The sales tax for the county hasn't been collected. There's been no sales really.
yeah,
So you can't avoid that. Now,
no.
it is
Well,
something like the garbage, and by the way, for folks who don't know, and you may have something similar, because we're talking nationally and internationally right now. In your community, you may have where when you're throwing out your garbage, the city is saying, okay, you have to use a special bag. In our city, it's blue bags. They cost a couple of dollars, but that money is kind of another tax. It's another fee that goes directly to the city to help pay for all of the things the municipality will be doing. So most communities have something similar, if not exactly that. So, I mean, so I'm understanding what you're saying, Jason. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I am saying in the scope of these things, how do we instantly, matter of fact, it's a good question. Do we suddenly bring that back? Like we go, okay, tomorrow everyone's now going to pay for the blue bags. You're going to pay for this fee for our city so that we can turn on everything that the city does. Okay, but where's that extra money coming from? When do we say, okay, you have enough time, enough money, you can now turn this back on? Is it in May? Is it June? Is it October? Is it January? Especially when you think about schools are closed. They may be closed, and in certain parts of the country, they're going to be closed for the entire year. So that means people are going to have to be paying for childcare. Do you have the extra money for this city fee when you have to pay for childcare if you can go back to work? We have to think about that. And sadly, I don't think enough of our leaders at state, federal levels have actually thought about that and said, well, wait a minute, how is this affecting Joe Average? Because they don't live. Cuomo doesn't live Joe Average lifestyle, you know?
It's interesting, because let me just say something there. It's interesting how we have a policy that actually falls apart, during, a crisis situation, because the way that we were actually generating our revenue, for our garbage, was based upon, people having to pay for this. And where, a lot, well, not a lot, but there are, municipalities where it's automatically, put on the tax roll, and it's just, something expected, for you would have to pay on your taxes. And it almost seems like, in my perspective, is that, this is going to continue to go on. And the only way that they're going to do this is just, add it on a tax bill. Because trying to basically tell somebody who can't afford, bags, who doesn't have a job, saying, oh, you're going to have to go blue bags now. I mean, when are you going to turn it on? You're just not going to, they're not going to be able to do that. But there's just, I mean, there's constant buildup. These little things like that are just perpetually getting worse. And you mentioned one thing about, just the sales tax and the revenue from the county.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that we were already headed to that I never actually, was able really to address or really look at was that $6 billion that we had within our budget in New York State, where most of that money was due to the fact of the expansion of Medicaid. And I believe a lot of the run up of the cost on that was because of the increased minimum wage, or that's what I pretty much was reading in the conclusion that I came to. But in any way, it looks like the governor had already started rolling out plans to actually start dumping a lot of the Medicaid bills onto the counties. And I can't imagine what would happen to Broome County if all of a sudden, we're starting to get, dumped with the entire amount of money for Medicaid. Because one of the interesting situations that I know that Broome County has is that one of our increasing populations of individuals happen to be those who are on Medicaid. And as we transition away and people pretty much exit out of Broome County to escape to places where they can be more prosperous, we have an importation of individuals who are more dependent upon the government. And for the longest time, Governor Cuomo made it so the state itself was actually financing Medicaid for the longest time. And now, where obviously the $6 billion is over, he's trying to figure out ways to actually pay that down. And I know that with down in the city area, they were actually starting to try to dump some of the, dump that out of them. And there's been pushback and stuff. But it was just a matter of time that, they came to the county. But you can't tell me now that during this, situation we have now that, that money, that $6 billion and all that other extra expense from Medicaid is not going to be just thrown straight on the shoulders of the Broome County taxpayers. And obviously we all know that we cannot afford to increase our tax rate any higher than we already have, considering it's, the near highest in the entire country.
Well, you're right, but here's my thing.
Sure.
Looking at turning back on the society, turning on the businesses, there are certain things that we have to do first. Healthcare is one of those things that we have to do. We don't have the money. We didn't have the money in the first place. We've been going into closer and closer and trying more and more to get to single payer, which we can't afford. And we're trying to put that on the backs of everything else. So when you take away the fundamentals, the first fundamental, I believe, is small business. If we don't get the small businesses back online and operating, then everything else that's built on that will fail. Whether that's healthcare, whether that's you name the program, it's going to fail. All the entitlements fail. So I'm not as concerned about healthcare right this second. The fact that we have deficit spending on that we're losing money, both as a state, as a county, as a nation. I'm not as focused on that right this second because we have to turn it back on. We've got to get the engine going again. And we're going to lose no matter what. As I said, the IMF has already said we're going to lose. We're losing 3%. Actually, for the United States, 5.9% of our GDP is going to shrink, go away. We're taking a huge hit, which, if I'm accurate on this, if I'm understanding it correctly, we're looking at roughly 8 to 12 million people being out of work for an extended period of time, for the next 9 months, possibly 18. And that's in a best case scenario. That's a best case scenario target. I don't think they're right on the best case scenario. But I do believe that we're going to have to plan for that. So is healthcare, paying for healthcare, the first thing on my list? No. Paying to get those businesses up and running and keeping as many of them as alive as possible is. I know most businesses, like most people, have reserves for about 1 month, possibly 2. 29% businesses are at that 1 to 2 month range. We need to get those businesses, at least half of them, to be able to survive the next 6 months. And if we can do that, then we will have enough revenues coming back in. We're going to have to scale back government. We're going to have to scale back entitlements. And that's when we start having that conversation about the cost of healthcare, the cost of all the entitlement programs, and seeing what we're willing to give and take on that. That's a very different conversation.
Yeah. Can I say something about the loans that were given to, are being offered to the businesses to keep their staff and their employees on hand? And
Absolutely.
yeah, just there's a lack of there's a lack of logic with the way that was kind of rolled out, because the bottom line is that any business owner has to foresee, that there's a benefit from actually taking on this debt. And also, too, like the catch-22 is what happens if, like, for example, they can maybe take that loan out and take that risk and pay those workers, essentially to do nothing, maybe for 2 months. But what happens if it extends for 3 and 4? And I'm looking at, and this is a huge problem, especially for anybody that's in the restaurant business, because, I mean, for one, they're already, they can't predict down the road. And obviously with Bennington, it's even worse, because if you're predicting Bennington University coming back or not, you can't do that at all. Because they don't show back up. So what's happening is that here they have an opportunity to get these loans to help these people, but there's just too much pressure on them to make a decision right now, because they can't see far enough into the future, and there's nothing there to to guarantee that they're not going to be, and to hawk up their eyeballs, if they do take that risk. And I guess one of the things that I had to kind of question too is that where the government comes in, what's the why, the question is that should there have been money set aside for the businesses to keep them afloat because of their debts, like, for example, maybe their rent and all this other payments that they had, and then they should have basically just separated their employees and put them on unemployment so they didn't have to worry about that at the same time, because I think the tie-in of the two just really just made it an impossible decision for these business owners to even consider it to some degree.
The process was completely screwed up.
Yeah.
The way this was done, especially in New York State, but because we went hyper reactive all at once. You went from one day 50%, we had 100% of employment, then 50% of employment was being mandated, then it was 25, and then nothing. And that happened within a week's time. No business can plan for that. No bank, no loans, everything suddenly gets thrown to the wayside because you can't adjust to that. There's no time for it. And I understand the reasoning that was given for it is fear. We were afraid everyone was going to die, which was not backed up by any data in the world, but that was the reason, because we were going to die. Okay, so that's the reasoning for it. It was wrong, but it's too late. Now we have the question, I believe, and I hope government And I know some elected officials, I've talked to a few, who are trying to figure out how do you turn it back on? Because you have to. Because we're going to lose, if we don't try and put something together very quickly, we don't lose 12%. We lose 29% of those businesses. We have 36 million people in the United States that will not go to work because there will be no work. And then we have, that takes us from a recession to a depression. And that goes global. And this is a very big problem. So I don't have a perfect answer for this. I don't think anyone has a perfect answer because the way this was done, there's no scenario that works to put it back together. We just tore it all down. We didn't really think about how we're going to build it back up. So I think, yeah, we have to have, for this, I don't like government spending. I don't like deficit spending. And I think we've spent somewhat improperly already. But yes, I think small businesses, we can't give them just a loan. We have to give them and I don't want the loan to be completely forgivable. We're not throwing money away. That, I think a portion of that loan should be forgivable, maybe 50%. Your business survives over the next 6 months, the next 9 months, then half of that money is forgiven. So that there is some accountability still left in there. You still have to make good business decisions. We're not just going to bail out everyone. And some people will fail. That's going to happen anyway. I'm not going to throw good money after bad because we're going to say, well, we want to save everyone. We can't. Everyone isn't going to survive this. But I want to give people a chance. And since it wasn't their business fault, that was government intervention, then government gets to intervene to try and get them out or give them the option, a way to get out. Is that a perfect answer? It is absolutely not the perfect answer. Is it an effective answer? I'm not sure. But that's the start, or at least that's a starting block I want to present, because I think that's the best long-term answer, because that gets the engine started again. And if that engine starts, we can start trying to cope with everything else. But this was done poorly. This was done erratically. This was done with a lot of fear and emotion. And whenever we see government react with emotion, we always see a complete fiasco, which is what we have. Now we have to build ourselves out of it. Because the reason why I'm saying the IMF reasoning, that they're wrong, that this is not, they're looking at only a 3% drop of roughly 6% for the United States. And the reason why, and 7% for Europe, and I think they're wrong on that, and I think it's going to be worse, is because their projections they're putting out there are based on the idea that we fix COVID, that it doesn't come back in November. I think I am absolutely sure that in October, along with the flu, which happens every year, we're also going to have COVID-19 again. And that's going to hit once more. And what happens at that point? Do we shut down the world again? Are we going to be just up and running for the summer and then shut down for the fall? That's ridiculous. You can't do that. We shouldn't have done it in the first place. We're going to have to work through it. But that means that a lot of people aren't going to go to work, that we're going to have a lot more people who are going to be off of work. This is going to stretch out the recession. It's going to stretch out the number of people not working for an extended period of time. There are going to be a lot of issues. We have to plan for that. There's going to be another round of fear where people are going to be hoarding food and terrified because they don't understand what's going to happen next. That's why I want to have this conversation now. Prepare for this. I expect another round of COVID. I expect the flu to hit at the same time. We're going to have bigger numbers of people infected with both of those things. And we're going to have more people who are going to die from both of those things, like we normally always do. But there's going to be a lot of fear behind it, and people are going to act irrationally. So we have to get those businesses back and running as best we can before it all starts falling down, so that we're in a better place for the next round of panic. That's the best answer I can give right now. That's why I'm trying to talk to people about it, because there are no perfect answers. And the more, and hopefully I'm hoping that Executive Jason Garnar, that Mayor Rich David, that Assemblywoman Donald Pardo, that current Congressman Anthony Brindisi, or the rest of the members of Congress, even Chuck Schumer. I know some of these guys watch this program from time to time. I hope they're hearing this. They're hearing the concern. They're hearing the issues that are being discussed and trying to say, okay, we need to plan around this. We have to really think ahead here. I know that's really strange for most people in government to do, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, whatever. But let's actually try that as a neat idea that, hey, let's plan for this. Let's plan ahead with a worst case scenario, and hopefully it won't be that bad, but at least we have an idea of what we're going to do, rather than just emotionally react to it as it happens and make the worst decisions we can possibly make. I mean, does that make sense to you, Jason?
Yeah, it just you made me think deeper about the situation and kind of the timeline. And it's like you were saying too, is that you were saying, you still want people and businesses to be accountable. And trust me, self-accountability and the ability for people to make good decisions, not blow more money after bad. But it's just like, in my mind, it's just like I mean, even the government or any official, or like, for example, like if Jason Garner or David or the business council, and they have money and they could try to keep some of these businesses afloat. But the question is that at some point you have to make decisions of which ones you're going to be pulling the plug on, or do we just, pull plug on everything and whoever stays afloat stays afloat? I mean, they really got to be asking these questions now, because like you're saying, I mean, if they really are planning on holding this thing out for 18 months, waiting for a vaccine, until we get rolling again, I mean, there's no way that any of these businesses are going to be able to sustain. I mean, what it really looks like is like, look at everybody, pull the plug, don't take loans out, let everything go under, and then scramble for money and try to rebuild, when the dust settles. Because I mean, unless, the government wants to just keep coming in and, I mean, the cronyism that it sounds like that's happening, or what's being almost suggested, because just to try to keep some of these guys, propped up, or to try to get the economy going again, it's just going to be I mean, it's going to be massive. I mean, you're going to be picking winners and losers all day long, and the government's going to be owning everything in the end. I mean, I mean, I guess now taxpayers are already going to be owning a piece of the airlines, I guess,
Yeah.
because of this whole predicament. And just imagine how many small businesses are going to be picked up potentially by the government or owned by the government, and the government's going to be making choices what you produce and what you sell. I mean, it's a slope I don't even want to go down. I'd rather have everything just get wiped out and then, crawl my way back up from the bottom, rather than having the government dictate what I do.
Well,
But I don't
that's the
know.
crash theory where everything goes down all at once and we just rebuild from the ashes.
Yeah.
That's not going to
Eh,
happen. No
yeah.
politician is going to sit there and say, "Let me deal with the pain. Let people deal with the pain, and we'll just rebuild properly with a good, strong foundation." They're not going to do it. Uh,
No.
People will not stand for that. It's too much pain all at once. Whether it's the right answer or not doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
the reality is we're going to see more socialism in America and around the world. You're going to see another round. I am absolutely sure of this. There is going to be another round of $1,200 going out to everyone in the country. Absolutely. We're going to see small businesses given forgivable loans. That's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen. Our debt is going to go up astronomically. We're going to go from 25, well, we were at 23, we added 2 trillion. We're going to add another 2 to 3 trillion minimum. This is going to cost the world roughly, just the United States, something like $9 trillion at the end of the day. We're going to have another round of money just going out. We're going to print more money. It's going to devalue our currency, and we're going to see more inflation. These are things that are going to happen. That is an absolute, I see no way around that. People may not like it, but I'd rather be wrong and have to say, hey, folks, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I got it wrong. I would love to have that as the answer and have to go and make that podcast, and that's not going to happen. I am absolutely sure of it. And my track record, especially with economics and politics, tells me that I'm probably right. But since we know these are the things that are going to happen, we have to make the best plan we can around that problem, because the politicians aren't going to do that. I'll give you a great example. Anthony Brindisi right now He is the current congressman. Is he talking about how we can save businesses? Is he talking about how he can help the small businesses in our region recover? How we're going to get them back functioning as close to 100% as possible? No. He's talking about Spectrum and about their bills, which, yes, I'm annoyed that Spectrum, which is our cable provider here for internet and cable TV, they're raising rates for various people, which they have done twice since Anthony Brindisi's been in office. And he has been complaining. That's the reason why he got elected, because he said he's going to lower everyone's cable and internet bill. And he has failed. No one in Congress cares. No one in Congress supports him. No one in New York State supports him. The Democrats don't support him. And now here he is talking about, well, we're going to lower that bill again. And Spectrum is telling him, we don't care what you think. You're ineffective. You're useless. So he's getting nothing done, but he's not trying to. He's trying to get reelected. He has made the decision that his reelection is more important than focusing on the small businesses. And so he is coming out and saying, I want Spectrum's such bad guys. I'm fighting the bad guys for you. Right now, I don't care that Spectrum is the bad guy. I care about whether or not my local bar, my local restaurant, my local bodega, and the hair place, my barber, that they're going to open up and that they're going to be here in 6 months. That's what I care about, because if they aren't, yes, my property taxes are going up. My personal taxes are going to go up. There's going to be more fees in New York State, less people working, more unemployment, which means more drugs, more crime, more people who are going to be in dire straits. I'm not worried about, yes, I'm upset that Spectrum is going to ask us to pay more money. But guess what? I'm more worried about what's happening in my community, because if my community, I can have the lowest internet bill in existence. They can make it $5 a month. But if my barber and the restaurant nearby and the bodega and the bar, they all close, that's not helping the community. Who cares that I can have the internet access to play a video game, watch a podcast, or watch a movie, but everyone's out of work? And my property taxes go up, and I can't afford to pay for my mortgage, my house. I can't afford to do anything. I mean, that's the problem. That's Anthony Brindisi right now. That's his focus. He wants to get reelected. I think to an extent, Executive Jason Garnar wants to get reelected. That's why he's picking a fight with Mayor Rich David. All he had to say today was, yes, I had a conversation with Mayor David and all the local government, and we decided that, we spoke to upper government and we made the fight, and people can go out in their cars without question or thought about whether or not they're violating the law, which they aren't. Instead, he says, well, I didn't want people to do it. You don't have, well, I don't care if Executive Garnar, who I know personally, and I don't think he's a bad man, but yeah, I don't care if he thinks that I have a right to do something that I know I have the right to do. His personal opinion about it, his feeling about it, is meaningless to me. But that's what he's focusing on. See, I'm a good guy. I'm letting people do something that they can do anyway. I'm sorry, Jason, you're wrong. I mean, Garnar, Executive Garnar, you're wrong. People always had that right. It's your job to say to the government, state government, saying, don't interfere with people's lives. That should have been his answer, and that he coordinated with other local government to do that. That's what Mayor David said. Now, is Mayor David worried about getting reelected? No, he's term limit out. He's not worried about trying to get the glory. But it seems Executive Garnar is. It seems that Congressman Brindisi is worried about reelection. That's a problem, because it appears, and I can't say that they are, but it appears that they're putting their political agenda ahead of the public's agenda. And I'd like to see them change that. I know, as I said, I know Executive Garnar. I think he's a better man than that. I don't think that's his sole idea, but that's how it's coming across. I can't say the same thing for Congressman Brindisi, who I also happen to know for 9 years. I don't think, I think he's straight up just looking for his reelection. But that's my personal thoughts on that. But I think they're both missing the goal. I think we have to focus on the small business. I think we have to focus on our community. And we have to make people aware of reality and have realistic precautions and realistic awareness. You know, crime has gone down, but domestic abuse has gone up. Suicides have gone up. Drug abuse has gone up in this time period. We need to address that. Again, I think the solution is small business. I think getting people back to work. Stop being terrified of something that has a survivability rate of 98%. If we focus and if our government at local and state and federal levels focuses on that aspect, that this is survivable, you're going to survive, and let's get back to that survival, then I think we do a lot better. The longer we focus on we're afraid and that you should be afraid too, the worse it is. Great for people staying in office, great for people being reelected, absolutely horrible for the communities that we live in. And that has to be said, and that has to be the different in the mindset, because if we don't do that, then I guarantee you in October, when this thing comes back, we're going to be in the same situation doing the same stupid things again, and we're going to be in a bigger hole than we started off with. Does that all make sense, Jason? I mean, you don't have to agree with me. You can tell me, Mike, I get it, but you're wrong, and I respect that. But doesn't...
No, I agree with you. I understand exactly where you're coming from on this. I mean, my perspective on both, Brindisi and Garner is pretty much the same line. But, it's just like, I think at this point, sometimes I just see what all the politicians are doing. They're really all just trying to make themselves feel relevant, because there's not a damn thing they can do, because it's all pretty much, dictated at the very top, I mean, the president, has some, now obviously the president and the governors are fighting each other, to say who can open things back up, but really when it comes down to the bottom level, they're just pretty much just scraping at, relevance, it's just like, okay, let's, ban people from doing this. Let's tell people not to do that. Let's, give people a break on the blue bags, it's just trying to do whatever they can, to say that, hey, we're here for you, helping you. But in fact, they're just waiting along with the rest of us, just saying, hey, what the hell are we going to do in the next, 12 months? It's just like, I don't really see an outpour. But, go back to Brindisi.
Yeah.
I think that, it's a political thing. The spectrum I always thought was a joke. It's just like, everybody's frustrated at the situation with the monopolistic, position that Spectrum was put in. But there's no checks and balances when it comes to that sort of cronyism that they have now, because the entire legislature within New York State is completely consumed by by the Democrats. And really, it's just like, why were they going to, remotely push against them? There's really no side to go on in that. And then again, when it comes to spectrum bills and internet and all that stuff, I guess maybe he's trying to reach out to the progressive base, maybe a younger group who really likes their tech and their technology and wants to make sure that they can always be able to, post their face on every single, multimedia thing that's out there. So that might be his number one objective. But when it comes to the recovery and where we're going to end up and what we're going to have to deal with as far as the election goes, it's the bottom line for me is I remember him Brindisi always bragging about the fact of how well he was able to work with the president, of the United States, and was able to pass certain legislation, which in my mind, when he mentioned about the veterans and other things, all I could think in the back of my head is like, that was what President Trump was campaigning on the entire time, was renovating the VA, doing all that sort of stuff. Had nothing to do with Brindisi. And then Brindisi, then it goes back and says, hey, look at what I was able to do as a freshman and, in the House there, and was able to work with the president. And then out of the same breath, then he says, well, but you know what? I had to make sure that, I impeached him. And I'm just like, okay. And
Anthony,
so we have now. we have now a guy who impeached the president, and we're going to go through the recovery, right? And you have to have somebody willing to work with the administration, be on good terms, and I mean, he may as well have just threw a flaming cocktail in there and just set the whole thing on fire. And says, okay, here, I'm coming back. I want to work with the president to rebuild, upstate New York now. I think right now that argument right there pretty much puts him at odds, because you can't take the position he has and then do what he did, against the president at the same time. Not unless, of course, he's really thinking that Joe Biden's going to be able to get elected, which
he isn't, and
we'll have to see that.
Democrats don't actually believe that, but the reality is, in knowing, and this is understanding politicians, Anthony Brindisi is an exquisite he is exquisite at reading the temperature of the room. He actually is an opportunist, a political opportunist on par with the best. He will jump onto whatever bandwagon there is. He has actually no real things that he stands for. He stands for whatever is going to get him reelected, whatever is going to get him more power. That is what I've observed of his career when he was in the assembly as well as now. He doesn't actually lead on things. He follows a pattern that gets him reelected. He's not effective at anything that he's done. Look at his record. I've told this to him in his face at a town hall, and he has no way to really counter it. I've looked at his record, Congress.gov, and you can see it for yourself. He doesn't have support. He doesn't have support of any of the Democrats. He's not leader on any of the issues. He takes credit for other people's work as his own, in particular the Fentanyl Act, where I have him on tape saying that it's his bill and his work, when in fact it's not. So he's more than willing to lie to people and count on the fact that no one's going to check that he's actually lying, which is why he's since changed his wording, because he saw that caught him and had proof. So that's why he's able to say, well, I support the president, I work with the president, but I want to impeach the president because he wants his reelection money so he can get in office. He doesn't care. He really doesn't care. And that's why he's right now talking about spectrum instead of small business, why he's focused on his reelection campaign instead of getting the communities that he's responsible for, that he is obligated to protect and represent. He's not talking about them. He's talking about his election. There are priorities here. Spectrum isn't the priority. Small business is. People getting their lives back is. Correcting and corralling in the overreach of government, such as when Operation Crush COVID by Executive Jason Garnar, where he officially mandated people to not go outside except on certain days. When we're hearing people say the government is trying to decide whether or not you can drive in your car with a poster to say happy birthday for someone, you know what? We need to corral that in. We need to stop that overreach, and we need to set some very firm limits on government. When they're saying that you can't own a gun to protect yourself, even though women have to deal with domestic abuse, they have to be worried about whether or not there's enough police out there to protect them from the bad people out there who now realize that everyone is home at all times and may have some nefarious thoughts. This is something that we need to focus on. When people need to have more firearm training, which I think is very important, I've spoken about before, because 2 million more people, or roughly 2 million more guns were bought since March, and I think that number has continued to go up. We have more people who are armed who don't know how to use that properly. We need to focus on making sure that they're going to get trained properly before something happens. Go ahead.
Yeah, the guns. That's one of my thoughts, is the best way to. I always thought when it came to pistol permits or any sort of regulation with a fee or a paywall behind your constitutional right, that if the government was going to have a requirement for you to actually do something, which is a right that you actually have, then it should be up to the government's responsibility to actually, come up with that money, and to, pay for that for you so you can actually, facilitate that. And the same thing goes when it comes to any sort of education when it comes to guns at whole. And quite frankly, I mean, I honestly believe that, this is, a pie in the sky kind of thing that I would
Mm-hmm.
push for, but really, I believe that all high school students should be, fully trained with firearms, while they're in school and fully educated, um, and even having, credits for that. And, some people will go, well, geez, I mean, obviously there's always going to be individuals who say, well, if somebody can't handle a gun, but I would have to say, well, look at, I mean, the bottom line is that the high schools are designed to help you, to get further on in life. And one of those things is that of joining the military. And so you have a certain, I mean, now at least if they are, given that opportunity and being trained at a very young age, within high school, how to properly handle, utilize, and a better understanding of a gun, then they would have more opportunities, further in life, whether they want to join the military, whether they want to get in law enforcement. And the thing is, too, is it takes away that fear and that uncertainty with firearms, that people have. And obviously, when it comes to being conservative, where you want, the opportunity to not only have guns and the benefits of it, but education is just, surely, a way to do it. But like I said, it's just that, that's a pie in the sky kind of idea that I always thought,
No,
we
it's
should
not.
be
No, it's
pushed.
not. And Jason, let me address this. And by the way, folks, as you can see, it's Jason from Bing. He's got a YouTube channel there and a couple of videos. I've had it up on the screen for a little while, so you can always reach him there directly. I also want to address the Liberty First Foundation mentioned in their range report, mentioned the government does not pay for anything, the people do, which is absolutely true. At the end of the day, everything the government spends is our money. It's from us. So they're spending what we give them or what they take from us. So we have a lot to say about this. Let me address something that you mentioned about guns. First of all, in the 1950s, you did get trained on firearms. Classes on firearms and gun safety were in schools. That was not uncommon. As a matter of fact, it was absolutely common. It's lately that we've stopped that and we've prevented it because, again, fear. We've been taught we should have absolute immense amounts of fear. And it's inappropriate because mass shootings are the same. They are on average 20 a year with 100 people a year. Is it sad? Is it bad? Yes. Is it new? No. It's been going on for over 60 years. And that curve hasn't really changed. Chicago has 550 people who've been shot since the beginning of this year, even with the crisis that's going on right now. And that's not because there isn't enough gun control. It's because there are bad people in Chicago and they don't care about the law. And that's the problem. There's your problem. Why haven't we seen mass shootings all over the place, even though there's 2 million more guns? Because that's not, the issue isn't the guns. And the whole point of why they have the licenses is not to do anything except to deny people the right to be able to have a firearm. In fact, a friend of mine, Maj Toure, who I did interviews with over at CPAC, and I have videos on him, is very explicit about this, as well as a couple of other people I've spoken to. The whole point of it is it's to price owning a firearm and being able to have your Second Amendment right priced out of your range. You can't afford it. And because you can't afford it, I mean, New York City, it costs over $600 just to get all the licenses and fees, and they can still say no, and you don't get any of that money back. It's absolutely ridiculous. Not that most people have that money available, and then you're going to get turned down anyway, because most people get turned down the first time anyway in New York City, and for most of New York State. Then you're being priced out. Do you have $1,200 to try and get a yes for your own constitutional right? Absolutely not. Most people don't. The average person doesn't. Again, the average person, $1,200 is their rent. Most people don't have enough money to make it through a month without having a job. So it's meant to stop you. But could the government at the state, local, federal levels have gun training? Absolutely. Are they? No. Did they used to? Absolutely. Will they do it in the future? No. Because they have built up the idea that we should be afraid of guns, not that we should have knowledge on them. And again, knowledge kills fear. You won't act fearfully, you won't be panicked, and you won't just blindly follow someone if you have knowledge, but you will do it if you have fear. That's what coronavirus has given us, fear. People have been reacting because of their terror over coronavirus instead of acting out of knowledge that 98% of us will be better off. If we started this entire coronavirus issue with the thought 98% of us are going to be okay, and we need to focus on the critical groups, 50 and over, especially those 70 and over, those who have immune deficiencies in men. If we focus on those groups and try and make sure they're as protected as possible through this, logically, taking our time to make sure we're doing things that will help them, we wouldn't have a global recession that I believe is going to last 18 months. That would actually make sense. But that's not what we're doing because we're not acting with knowledge of, 98% of the world will survive. That the overwhelming majority, I think it's 86% last I saw, of people who contract coronavirus survive coronavirus based on the last numbers that I believe were out there, because most of the people who are getting it tend to be in those high-risk groups. And even they overwhelmingly survive. If we started with the thought of survival and how to best protect the people who are most at risk, we don't wind up where we are now. But if you have fear, which we have, on something that is so incredibly survivable, then we don't get to this place. And again, Liberty First mentioned there are only 4,000 concealed carry permits issued in the 5 boroughs of New York City, and the vast majority of those are work-related. And that's out of a city that has 8 million people, and you can't tell me that 8 million people, only 4,000 of them have firearms. New York State, on the other hand, has 1.2 million concealed carry permits issued to citizens, and that's out of a population of 18 million, where 1 in 5 people in New York State own a firearm. So, 8.76 million people in New York City. I know I was about right. Guns aren't the problem. The government is the problem. And in each case, it is the actions of government to protect its power rather than represent the people is always the problem. And everything we're talking about always comes back to that. And it always comes back to the people. And that's why I want to empower people. I want them to have more knowledge and getting more information out there. Not many people are looking at the Business Insider and checking out what's going on with the news on the International Monetary Force. Most people are not checking out what the International Monetary Force just did in a global economy meeting that they had, and that comes from the BBC. You know what? That was from The Guardian. And the reason why they're not doing these things, they're not being informed about these things, is because if you had that information, you say, okay, we can prepare. I can help small businesses by, when they come back, I'm going to go into my local bodega, my hair cutter, to the restaurant, to all these little small businesses, and I'm going to spend something, $20 here, $20 there. No, I'm not going to buy what I normally would buy. I'm not going to go whole hog, but give them something to keep them alive. And the government will use my taxes and inflate, create some inflation, but keep them alive so that we can get back to a point where we can normally get back to that regular sales, that regular tax revenue, so that we can have some of these programs. And we're going to have to still pare back some of these programs. But that's not going to happen because they're working off of fear. They don't want people to be informed. I disagree with that. That's why I have this program. That's why we're having this conversation. And not everyone will agree, and I'm okay with that. I don't care if you're a member of PLOT, which is the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, or you're a member of the Tea Party. I don't care if you're a libertarian or a conservative or Republican or Democrat. Some of them will agree with everything I've just said. Some of them will disagree. That's okay. But if we're not having that conversation, and if we're not having that conversation led by the thought of fear first, then we're never going to move past this. Because the next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be another flu. There's going to be another Ebola, Zika, Chinese, Spanish flu, whatever, that's going to come up. There's going to be another one. And what are we going to do then? Because they've already set the precedent that we're going to terrify everyone. We're going to allow the government to react emotionally. We're going to let the government supersede all of the rights of every American out there and do whatever it wants and take away our rights and our abilities to do things. So what's the next thing they're going to do? They're going to start censoring us? Does that mean that they're not going to let people like me or anyone else come out and say, hey, the data shows that there's 98 survivability on this thing? Are they going to say, well, you can't say that because that's not what the government's saying? And so we're going to shut you down. And by the way, we're knocking on your door because you got to go. Because people are saying to me, Mike, that's silly talk. No, it's not. It happens all the time, all around the world, throughout history. This is very common. And if we don't pay attention and educate ourselves, it will happen here. And it will be one of the next results. Is it going to be when coronavirus comes back? Maybe not. Will it be next year's new flu or whatever it is? Will it be the one after that? I don't know, but it will happen. So I want people to be educated. I want us to have plans in place. I want us to think logically and to make the best decisions we can, or else. And I'm really terrified of the or else. We can survive a recession. We already survived a recession. We survived a depression. We can survive all of these things. We survived mass shootings. We've survived the fact that there's 160 million Americans who own 350 million guns, actually 357 now because 2 million more were bought. We can survive that because those aren't problems. The problem is that we're being led around by fear. And if we are not becoming informed, if we're not looking at the news, if we're not preparing based on our knowledge, we get abused. And it's no different than a domestic abuse. In the fact that we are being abused and we're being used because we're being ruled by fear of this super powerful thing called government that we actually have control over. Well, let me clarify. It's similar to aspects of domestic abuse. I don't mean it's the same thing. It's not. But it's similar in that there's fear, and that fear is controlling us. And we have to take knowledge saying, hey, there are things we can do to prevent this and to protect ourselves and to overcome this. And that's something I want to try and put out there. But I want to thank you, Jason. You've given a lot of information. I love the feedback, and I thank you for it. I also thank the Liberty First Foundation and that you guys are also involved. These are all, a lot of people think these are all separate things. They're not connected. I hope people can see in our conversation, it's all connected. You can't have one without the other. All these things relate back to each other, and they all come back to us as individuals. And our individual freedoms, when we use them, empower us to overcome any obstacle. And that's one of the biggest things I want to put out there. And that's why I'm so positive. I try and keep a very positive mood here as we talk about coronavirus, because overall, at the end of the day, we are incredibly powerful as individuals and as communities. And as long as we maintain our power based on our knowledge and our thoughts and having logical solutions, we overcome everything. Everything. I saw it when I was in California, and we had the North Ridge earthquake, which was absolutely devastating. It was horrendous. But I tell you what, it was It was the community coming together that put us back on our feet, not the government. And when I was in Moscow and I watched the coup attempt happen, and I watched people terrified. We were all thinking we were going to be locked up in a gulag, that we were going to be shot in the middle of the street. It was the people coming together that stopped that. We are powerful. We are more powerful than any disease, any kind of government, any kind of oppression, when we use our power together without fear, with knowledge, saying, okay, let's solve this. I know Liberty First has mentioned. Thank you, Michael, and to Jason for a great conversation. Next time, I will try to call in myself. And I thank you for that. I know there's only one line that we really use for calling in. And I enjoy having a conversation. And Jason, I'm thankful that you're having the conversation with me. I know we've been on now for about an hour and hour 20 minutes. I'm going to... Jason, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to finish up for about 10 minutes here, and then I'm going to jump off. If anyone else wants to call in, we've got about 10 more minutes. But was there something else, Jason, before I let you go? Was there something else that you wanted to say to the audience, to anyone listening, whether they agree or disagree?
Yeah, it's just, there was something you mentioned there about kind of like the fear and what is happening. And you mentioned, a certain group in our area, the Plot and the Progressives, and we have the Citizens Action.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely seeing a lot of rhetoric and a lot of, push for, we're going into further debt. And their push, man, is just constantly tax the rich,
Mm-hmm.
and really just trying to drive out. And, one of the things with them, though, is just that they tell you right on all their, pages exactly what they stand for. And they are against capitalism, and they're against property rights.
Yes.
And they want, you to lose your property. And they want the government to basically take control of everything and to micromanage everything in your life. And, you can continue to try to, see exactly where they're trying to worm their way in and to actually, do that, day after day,
Mm-hmm.
within your own life. And obviously, too, when it comes to just, it's just property. I mean, I would say, the landlords, and the battle that they have. I mean, I don't know how far I can get into that, but I mean, I've seen one thing now is just where, a lot of landlords are kind of screwed at this point. Anybody who has to, pay taxes or has any sort of, money to put, towards, mortgages. I mean, they're looking, they don't even know what to do at this point because there is no bailout for them. And there is no way that they can, maintain without anybody paying them at the end of the day.
Yet, like I said, I expect another tranche, and this is one of the reasons why there's going to be more money that's going to be given back to the people. There's going to be more debt spending. And yeah, you're right. Groups like Plot, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, the Democratic Socialists, Citizen Action, essentially the fringe of the far left. These are radicals. They are incredibly small groups with incredibly large voices that are very often more than willing to be violent. We saw that with Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, or otherwise known as Plot, here in the Southern Tier region, Columbus Day. They hijacked an entire parade, terrorized kids, because they thought they had a better message and they didn't care about the community. Not that they couldn't have made their protest on the sidelines, not that they couldn't have let the parade happen and make their announcements and gotten just as much coverage. No, their thought was they wanted to instill fear in people to be able to get power over people. These are groups that we have to watch out for. They're not done. They're not letting this kind of crisis go without waste. Rest assured, they're planning to do more. They use these kind of things, this fear, as their momentum. I don't agree with them at all. I don't agree with their tactics or their ideology. And I'm more than happy to speak out and say that, which is why they don't like me at all, and that's okay. But as long as we are not reacting in fear to these kind of tactics, they're, those used by Plot or even those used by members of government like Anthony Brindisi for their own advantage. As long as we are looking at this not with emotion, but with knowledge, we will overcome it all. That is my belief. That is my absolute belief. I believe in the public. I believe in individuals who make up the public and making the best choice possible when given the information to make that choice. And I just want to remind people, you have that power. You are capable of doing that. And the information is available to you. You don't need to be spoon-fed parts of it by news media that may have an agenda. In fact, all the news media have an agenda. But there are sources and there are pieces of the information out there that you can put together. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. Read more than just one source. CNN by itself is not an answer. It's not the truth. But if you're looking at CNN and Fox and BBC America, and you're looking at the data itself, you suddenly see a true answer. That's what I tend to believe. But I do understand your concerns, and you know what? These are concerns that we are addressing. I try to address on a regular basis. I know many others do as well. I know a lot of people agree. The overwhelming majority of people don't agree with Plot. They don't agree with Antifa. They don't believe in the radical, extremist fringe left, the progressive movement or socialist movements. Not everyone's willing to say it out loud. That's okay. I will. I don't mind saying it out loud. And if they want to attack me for it, let them. I got thick skin. I'm not afraid of them. They don't have any real power. And God help us, they never will. That's my belief. But I do want to thank you for bringing that up. And I thank you for all of the conversation. I know you've been looking forward to speaking on the show and talking. How'd you enjoy it?
It's good.
Good. Hopefully it's not... Go ahead.
I'll call in again sometime.
I'm looking forward to that, man. I want to hear your thoughts. And I thank you for everything that you brought up and all the things that we were able to talk about today. All right?
Sounds good. Have a good one.
You too, Jason.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye. So, folks, of course, you can always call in or text. You can text at 607-242-1582. You can call into that line as well. You can reach me at MV Consult on Twitter. You can reach me on Facebook at Voss Political Commentary. Yes, I lost a tooth during this coronavirus. I have not gone in to get it replaced yet, so it makes me speak a little bit odd. Trying my best. I'm waiting for things to calm down before I get that taken care of. But I thank you guys, everyone, whether I get 1,000, 10,000 views, or even one. I thank you, each and every one of you, for being involved. You all matter. You all make a difference. And I thank you for that difference that you guys are making. And I know we're going to get together. We're going to get through this. Like I said at the very beginning, and I said many times, coronavirus, 98% survivability. You're going to get through this. I'm going to get through this. We want to get our community through this. And right now, the best answer I can think of is we have to plan for our small businesses, getting them started up, getting them a cash infusion, just enough to get them going, to keep them moving forward as we get the rest of our society back on its feet. But it's worth it. And that will help us in the long term. That's what I believe. I'm sure I know there were a couple dozen other things I wanted to talk about, but I think I covered a whole lot here today. And it's been an hour and a half, so I'm a little tired. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think of this conversation? How do you feel? Do you think we got it right? Do you think we missed some things? Is there something that we should have talked about that we didn't? Let me know. Let us know. We're looking forward to hearing from you. But until then, I want to thank you. And if you weren't able to see this live on Facebook, I will post this on Facebook. For some reason, Facebook isn't letting it go through live. I don't know why. They keep changing their settings or something. But folks, otherwise, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I hope you're all going to have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you all very, very soon. Thank you.